Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my channel. And today we have another video, this one from a YouTuber named Aleczandxr. And he made this video, well, actually he made a lot of videos that I am interested in checking out and we are definitely going to react to. And the first one that we're going to be watching is going to be focused on Hunter x Hunter, but more specifically one of my absolute favorite characters in all of Hunter x Hunter, Meruem. Meruem, is not just one of my favorite characters, but I do believe to be one of the absolute best characters in all of anime and manga. So let's just go ahead, full screen this, and let's listen to what he wants to say about Meruem. Oh yeah, this video, like he says, is going to contain spoilers for Hunter x Hunter, so there you go.
なぜあのようなゴミが王を名乗るのだ。
人間の世界ではよく見られる現象ですね。死も妻もない無能者が血のつながりやコネクションのみで不相応の地位につくこと。
なんという不条理。
It's true.
デクの異性など百害を生むだけ。
In the hands of an incompetent, power brings nothing but ruin. While an utterance of a perspective from a character in a story does not necessarily equate to that story endorsing that message, these words, said in the midst of an embarrassing display from the top of humanity's totem pole, are arguably this story's most succinct encapsulation of Togashi's message on the subject of power, or at least one half of that message. As described in a couple of really nice thought pieces that are currently on screen and that I will link in the description, oftentimes, and especially in the case of shonen, power is needed to achieve one's goals or to bring about necessary changes. In shonen, the youth tend to be possessed of a desire to use their power to enact alteration. One of the primary mantras of a lot of these types of stories, and of Hunter x Hunter in particular, is the following: if you have power, use it. If you have influence over societal patterns, or if you are positioned to cause some sort of change, you have no excuse to sit idle, and you have an obligation to either seek out your endeavors or change the world for the better. Now, that quote-unquote better differs depending on your personal views of the way the world should be, and certain characters in the series would probably benefit the world by abstaining. But the point is that the presence of personal power should motivate you to take action, to be proactive, and to shape the world in what you believe is the most beneficial way, while obviously being smart and contextually realistic about it. Humans have pure desires, but humans are often upset at society or their lives in one way or another, yet passive and decadent, not willing to get off their asses and make a change in this world, and this is reductive. At minimum, we all have a tiny bit of power and ability to act, and it is up to us to use it. Now, this sort of philosophy is communicated incredibly tellingly in the Chimera Ant arc, through the most important character in said arc, because this is an aspect of life that the Ant King is acutely aware of. Perhaps due to being born into this world as an intelligent, philosophical outsider with a fresh perspective, Meruem is consistently aware of the nuances of his personal power from birth. He initially plans to conquer the world and wipe out humanity because he is essentially programmed to view this as the best course of action, and due to this, he sees it as his duty. Though his mindset is one-dimensional and shallow at the start, he is an advocate of the idea that power, which he initially conceptualizes as pure physical strength, dictates the world, shown through his musings early on, alluding to the idea that the weak are inferior and that the strong prevail.
時にピトーよ。お主、なかなか強いな。殺すつもりでやったのだぞ。褒めて使わず。
もったいないお言葉。
Being aware of his strength, Meruem knows that he must use it to create a paradise for his new kingdom, one that is beneficial by his perspective. But he proves to be flexible and absorptive, taking in what he learns about the world as he is exposed to different things. He notes the cowardly, disgusting indulgence that the leaders of the current order are characterized by, sees the illogical focus on aristocracy and bloodlines instead of fitness to rule, and subsequently, he sees that humans are pathetic. Self-interested, hypocritical, and incapable of seeing things beyond their own needs. Meruem sees this and notes that this is the way of society, and that he is not wrong for wanting to rip it up and start again. Yet, his learning does not stop there, because he begins pursuing some alternate ideas apart from physical strength and eating. Intellectual games, philosophy, purpose, identity. He sees that he is not all-knowing, and he is willing to have his philosophy molded by opposing and synergistic ideas, because he comes to learn that humans, meaning both others and himself, are dualistic, and because he's a supreme demonstration of how to wield power, deliberately and carefully, yet with conviction. What is notable and profound about Meruem is that he has both the material power and influence and the physical strength to do virtually anything he wants. And yet he ponders, and he thinks. And he is not reckless with his power, because he truly knows the totality of his influence and wants to learn about himself and the world around him before choosing what to do. Even before he started truly showing the end results of his development, his restraint is palpable, apart from his early focus on eating Nen-powered brains and killing children. While his soldiers and minions organize the plan for conquest, begin gathering military might, and turning the world on its head, Meruem is unconcerned, and more occupied with learning about himself and the planet he has come to inhabit through learning about others. Something that initially started as a quest to become the best at everything, but slowly evolved into a constant stream of comprehension and an exercise in perspective. And what is amazing about his desire to learn about others is that it's a nearly subconscious thing. He broadens his horizons and begins seeing other perspectives unintentionally at first. Thanks to a certain Gungi master, he becomes empathetic and sees that power is not as shallow a concept as he thought, that it can manifest in different ways, not just brute strength. Meruem isn't arrogant and unbending, and that is key to how he rules and lives. He doesn't know what to make of the person he is, of how he conceptualizes Komugi, and of how he subsequently views the world. So instead of destroying those weaker than him in the ways he can comprehend, and instead of assuming that all of humanity is like the worst of humanity, he decides to learn, wrestling with his inner desires in order to make the most informed decisions for both his own personal happiness and for those he is destined to rule over.
世は王だ。だが、世は何者だ。世は一体何のために生まれてきた。
As previously stated, Meruem was born into a set role wherein he would destroy all humans.
To me, I'm sorry, I don't mean to pause, but to me, this is one of the reasons why I absolutely love Meruem, is that whenever you get other anime shonen antagonists, they usually don't, you know, the writers usually don't take the time to actually help you get to know who this person is. We don't get to spend any time with them other than when, you know, the good guys eventually come in and they fight them and eventually defeat them, and that's it. That's all they did. That's all. That's the only reason why they're there. But with Meruem, that's not the case. While yes, that does end up happening, it feels like Togashi was trying to do something else with this antagonist other than just be another obstacle for our protagonist. And I think that's one of the reasons why so many people love Meruem.
He was arguably genetically coded to follow these principles, but his humanity is what gave him pause. It is what granted him empathy and deep, complex thought, and what made him consider what his great power and authority meant. As he said, "In the hands of an incompetent, power brings nothing but ruin." So, Meruem's personal journey throughout Chimera Ant is a combination of his quest to understand himself and what he wants in life, and it is also his method of finding out how to be competent, how to use his power responsibly. It is his duty, and his countless matches with Komugi, his self-reflection, his very human desire for a name and an identity, his reflections on the stupidity and wonders of mankind, his musings on kingship, and finally, what he learned about humans through his bouts with Komugi and Netero, these all factor into his role. He had never really put any thought into the specifics of his rule prior to learning from Komugi and Netero, but he formed a proper idea for the way forward once he had gathered enough knowledge, wisdom, and experience. The first time, the literal first instance that Meruem proclaims his plan for the world going forward, apart from the one that was thrust onto the soulless title of king, was when he decided that he would allow certain select humans to live, and later on, that the ants would reevaluate their strategies and allow humanity to live in certain sections of his new world in larger quantity. Yes, it is still a form of oppression, and yes, it is still a little bit past what most would consider reasonable, but perspective is needed here. Meruem started at a point where he came into this world thinking that he had to totally destroy all humans, that there was no choice there. He was exposed to the hilariously inept way that the setting was functioning, how hypocritical people are, how self-destructive and top-heavy the world is, how those in power are totally ill-suited. He took all of that into heavy consideration and still decided that the human race deserved to exist. This very fact is huge, given all that he was programmed to do and all that he learned.
わずかながら生かすに足る人間がいることを知った。貴様に免じ特区を設け、人類の永住を許可しよう。食用にする人間も選定の際に数や質を考慮する。
See, sorry, I just want to pause for a second. I just want to talk about that for a bit. What was interesting to me there was Netero's response to Meruem. You know, he gets a little pissed at the fact that he sees humans as food. But at the same time, he doesn't realize the irony that this is exactly how we see animals. I mean, we have animals living in farms. We raise them, and then eventually we eat them in order to survive. And to me, I find it interesting that there are a lot of people who don't find anything wrong with that, and yet the second another species looks at us that way, that's when we get pissed. And yet no one sees the irony there, that someone else sees us the way we see animals. It's just, I always found that interesting.
States that these designated human survival areas are solely for special people. People like Komugi and Netero, who excel and are extraordinary in some manner. But this isn't necessarily as hierarchical and brutally meritocratic as it seems, because what he also admits during his journey is that people can be skilled in various, nearly innumerable fields. It is essentially his way of beginning to conceptualize the idea that people can be special in any number of ways.
小麦は飛躍的に強くなるだろう。
But
軍
only
議のみの話だがな。
Nothing else.
人。もしも小麦を今回の明日やる方法で選別していたらどうなっていた？
死んでますね。あくまで選別は兵士たりうる肉体と精神の持ち主を選ぶためのやり方ですから。
小麦と出会って強さにもいろいろあると学んだ。
See, here's the thing, and that's, again, this is why I love the Chimera Ant arc so much, because it raises these points that makes you think, because yeah, because he said it himself right there, strength can manifest in different ways. And to me, one of the things that, and I don't know if Togashi did this on purpose, but one of the things that was so interesting about this is it does make you think about things that are happening to us in real life. Like, for example, our school systems. Like the systems, the academic system is built to evaluate children in certain ways. And when a lot of kids don't pass those, I guess you could say, those standards that they have, they're deemed useless. But what they don't realize is that while they may not be skilled in those areas, like for example academics, they excel in other ways. And the problem with schools is that they only judge you based on certain set criteria, and they don't bother to think that maybe this person is actually talented in a way that we didn't even think of. Just because he or she isn't good at English, isn't good at math, isn't good at science, isn't good when it comes to phys ed, okay, that's fine. Or even art. But maybe this person has value in other ways that you didn't even bother to look. And it's like he said here, it's like if Komugi was put through the selection, she would die because it judges them based on mental and physical prowess, but it doesn't judge them in other ways. So because of that, you risk eliminating someone who could have offered you something that you probably didn't even know they could have. Do you see what I mean? It's just, again, I love this arc. My God, I love this arc.
例えばここへ来る途中、要は子供を殺
Yeah,
した。
that child died.
あの子供がもしかしたらある分野で
Exactly.
凌駕する際を目覚めさせていたかも
You
しれない。
don't know. And
その
you
目を
killed it
用
before you
す
gave it a chance to find out.
大した意味もなく済んだ。
But
It's very significant that the only two humans Meruem ever met and got to know properly were ones that he grew to deeply admire. Now, obviously not everyone is as special as Netero or
True.
Komugi, but regardless, given that, I think it's conceivable that he would allow, in his hypothetical world, more people than it initially seems. He would come to learn and understand that others can be extraordinary in even more different ways. I think that this was his starting point, and that he would come to be a tad more lenient if he were to continue developing his philosophy had he not died. And at the same time, he clearly meant to stomp out injustices and redundancies like the false Diego, to ensure that those in power not only use that power, but use it properly and build a prosperous place to live. In the midst of his fight with Netero, Meruem was in the process of becoming a terrific demonstration, personification, and extension of the ideal way to wield power. Due to his growing self-understanding, empathy, perspective, and most importantly, humanity, he has the ideal amount of intelligence, deliberation, and restraint, but he has systemic plans and the ability and intention to use his power as he sees fit. After all, he was entirely unwilling to fight Netero, not wanting to use his strength for what he perceived as a useless excuse for bloodshed, until Netero offered up something of deep value to him. And in terms of his plans for society, he was clearly approaching that with similar tact, as I explained. So, what does this all mean with regards to Togashi's messages about humanity? Well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that he very much chastises the human race for various reasons evident particularly in the Chimera Ant, Election, and Dark Continent arcs. He is very adept at using his characters as powerful emotional vehicles to display his thoughts about the darkness of mankind. Yet, he isn't a cynic at all. For some more elaborate thoughts from me on where, why, and how Togashi presents his more positive ideas about humanity, I would direct you to my videos on Killua, Leorio, or Shiapoof, but there is a flip side evidence with regards to this topic too. Chimera Ant in particular is a story all about the differing perspectives and subtleties of humanity. The good, the bad, the painful, the dark, and the hopeful, and we see that through Meruem. Not just through his journey to finding happiness through human connection and love, but through his use of power. I've already established how Meruem is a brilliant display of how to wield authority through his malleability, restraint, and deliberation. Yet, why does he have these aspects to him in the first place? Because he's human. Without any humanity within him, Meruem would not have bent or felt or taken in opposing or contrary ideas. He would have simply destroyed and mindlessly oppressed, as he was programmed to do. But he didn't. And through this, we can see that we, as a people, are more than capable of being empathetic and thoughtful and using power properly. It's just that hubris and self-interest often cloud that. Meruem could see crystal clear, dropped into a very flawed world with open eyes and a fresh perspective. and through his humanity, he displayed what the world needs. His mother said that his name meant the light that illuminates all, and she may have been totally correct if he had lived. Again, please don't mistake my position here as one stating that Meruem's proposed plan to Netero was the perfect plan. As I said, it's hard to know for sure, but it was probably too extreme to be reasonable. Meruem did not have everything totally figured out, but the trajectory of his development, his growing humility, empathy, and understanding, his patience and deliberation, his continuous desire to learn and expand his horizons, it all lends evidence to the idea that he would eventually be the ideal king for all.
人類という種のためか。ならば、世の行為はむしろ強力だと言っておく。例えばお前たちの社会には、国境という縄張りに似た仕切りがあろう。境の右では子供が飢えて死に、左では何もしないクズが全てを持っている。狂気の沙汰だ。世が壊してやる。そして与えよう。平等とは言えぬまでも理不尽な差のない世界を。初めのうちは力と恐怖を利用することを否定しない。だがあくまでそれは秩序維持のためと限定する。要は何のために力を使うかを学習した。弱く、しかし生かすべきものを守るためだ。敗者を虐げるためでは決してない。
The ending song for the second half of the Chimera Ant arc presents the prevailing idea here. The title of that song, Hiyori Itai, can be directly translated to two sides of a coin in English. Incredibly indicative of the different aspects of the arc that I've talked about in the past, but arguably most so here. Humans are capable of turning the world into the very pits of hell itself and creating such monstrosities such as the miniature rose, but they are also capable of all of the beauty displayed through the characters that we see throughout the story. Chimera Ant is not a cynical, nihilistic story by any means. It is a multifaceted, layered work of overarching and branching perspectives, of duality and depth, and arguably most importantly, of light, accentuated and thrown into sharp relief because of the darkness.
そうか。世は。
私はきっとこの日のために生まれてきました。
この瞬間のために生まれてきたのだ。
Hunter x Hunter is full of individuals who use whatever bits of material or physical power they have to change the world around them in ways they see fit. It's a story of people full of personal agency. Kurapika maximizes his abilities to carry out what he believes is his duty. Leorio uses what little influence he has to set out to positively impact the world in his own way. Killua uses his power to free his little sister from captivity and save his best friend. The anti-Chimera Ant Squad do what they can to protect humanity. And Hisoka constantly strives to get his nut. And appropriately, Netero is one of the best and most interesting displays of power and conviction as well, as his final stand and battle are the prevailing outcome of his life's ideals. A combination of his ambition to remain at the peak of strength and his duty to humanity. And Meruem's existence provided him with the opportunity to use all of his power in a way he purely yearned for, fighting with all he had, using his martial arts mastery to defend his race, something that was acknowledged by his expression of thanks in the midst of their fight.
感謝であった。感謝するぜ。お前と出会えたこれまでの全てに。
As I've said before, Togashi rarely moralizes in Hunter x Hunter, but this instance is one of the cases where it can be argued that he does, with a mix of the ideals carefully developed by Meruem over time, the nearly protagonistic nature of Meruem by the climax of the Chimera Ant arc, and Netsudo himself's acknowledgement that what he was doing may have been wrong, all showing that Meruem was the one in the closest thing to the right here. And that's why it was with such a heavy heart that Netsudo had to do what he did. He knew that Meruem held wholehearted desires for a just world, and that he was equipped to do that and become a great leader. And in the deepest foundations of his soul, he probably wanted to see Meruem carry out his goal. Maybe not entirely if it meant ants prevailing over humans, though at the very least, he admired Meruem's ideals and methods. But Netsudo had a job to do. A method of quote-unquote winning that unfortunately undercut all of the things that he represented, other than his trepidatious pride in his race's penchant for cynical victory. By his use of the rose, he destroyed both his desires for a true victory as a result of his strength and skill, and Meruem's honest motivations for improving society. And him piercing his heart is a symbolic representation of that. Netsudo spurned the things that his heart yearned for, becoming what many may perceive as ant-like in carrying out what he had to do. He did what he did with reluctance but conviction, because it was his responsibility.
早めにやっちまった方がいい。心がぶれる前に。
It is absolutely cowardly to sit by and expect one's ambitions and goals to fall in one's lap, and to expect the world to change without enacting that change. It is quite an empowering idea. Yet I must stress that this is obviously not a story endorsing using power recklessly and psychopathically as people like Hisoka do. It is not championing any single philosophy or ideal held by any character in the story, other than arguably Meruem's. Not outwardly, at least. It simply displays these different characters and shows how they use their influence with regards to their motivations to muse on and sort of study the nuances of power in the hands of different types of people. In this regard, Togashi does not baby the audience, and as I've said, he often avoids moralizing. Partly to ensure that his perspectivism is carried out in full force, but also in order to allow readers and watchers to think for themselves and form their own opinions given what he presents. This is a story advocating action and agency, one full of people who strive to use whatever means possible to make the world better, with varying definitions of better depending on whose viewpoint it is. But this very aspect reinforces the aforementioned perspectivism that permeates the narrative. Everyone has their own story, their own ideals, and their own motivations and desires, and everyone sets out to affect and shape the setting. There is very little passivity in Hunter x Hunter, because virtually the entire cast has a means to impact things and views it as their duty to do so. From psychopaths looking to use their power to have some fun, to those killing as a means, an end, and a method of identity in and of itself, to a young boy curious and wide-eyed and determined to discover the answer he seeks. Power is a necessity to achieve one's goals and to change society. Power is a responsibility and must be handled with care yet utilized. And no one in this story realized this to a greater extent than Meruem. Many thanks for watching.
Okay, there it is.
要は、この世を滑るため生を受け、当初お主らに家畜以上の感情を持ち得なかったが。
And then it all changed.
今は違う。
Yeah.
わかっとらんな。人間の強さは学習能力の高さにある。
I think that's it. Yeah. Okay, so there it is. That was a great video from Aleczandxr about Meruem. And yeah, like he said, Meruem is, I mean, to me, I've already said this, but still to this day one of my absolute favorite characters ever. And to me, I still think he is one of the best antagonists written in all of anime and manga. I've only met a few that you could say rival him when it comes to just how well written the character is, how well he develops, how well he progresses throughout the story. And to me, it's one of the reasons why I cannot wait for Hunter x Hunter to come back, because Meruem, and by extension the Chimera Ant arc, shows you just how good of a writer Togashi is. So I'm just going to end the video right here, guys. Let me know your thoughts as always in the comment section down below. Remember to like the video, share the video if you haven't, subscribe if you haven't, and remember to click on the bell icon to let you know whenever I post a new video and whenever I go live. Thank you so much for watching and or listening. Remember to stay safe and take care of yourselves, and please join me for the next video. Bye for now.